Good afternoon, everyone. The incriminating evidence was YouTube footage of me belly dancing, so something not to be missed, I suppose. Laila, good afternoon. It's a great honour for me to meet you. We met you last night, but to meet you in this, on this occasion, in these circumstances. Susan talks about you as a person of great insight. You are blind, of course. So
I'm not.
I'll tear up my notes now. So you're very smart, obviously. So for the benefit of this audience, describe what I look like. How do you see me?
He won't let me touch him.
No, well, that's later. Well, what do you think?
That's the evening session.
What do you think I look like?
Tell you the truth, I'm not good in lying. I asked a little bit, just about your hair.
Oh.
Well, I learned that you're partially, you have partial hair and partial gray.
Partial hair,
I would have
partial
liked
grey.
to think you have brown hair or darker hair, but it's okay. You're a sexy man, Paul. Anyway.
You are a person of remarkable insight, then I can tell you that. And you've brought the weather with you because, I mean, we're grateful to the audience who've made it here. But before you left the Middle East, actually, you were delayed because of snowfall, wasn't it?
Indeed.
Yeah.
I sat 2.5 hours on the airplane waiting for takeoff because of snow. And it took me ages to convince a taxi driver who pretended he has very special tools that don't exist in Jordan to get me to the airport. But it was a tough job, actually, to get there.
Yeah, but you're here.
I'm
and
here, yeah.
We're delighted to see you.
Thank you.
How do you interpret this brief? You've accepted this role as chair of the City of Centre Garden of Reflections, chair of Insightful Healing.
Right.
What does that mean? How do you interpret the role?
How do I interpret the role? I mean, to me, any interaction between cultures and between people's experiences can be insightful healing. And I think, to me, connectedness and bridging is healing. So by me being there here, it's probably healing for all of us, I think. And I mean, especially Ireland has a similar history to Palestine. I hope one day we'll have less checkpoints and we'll be able to drive without military barriers in Palestine too. But to me, it is healing to share experiences and challenges and possibilities together anyhow. And perhaps I can bring parts of the world with me and parts of my experiences to people here, and what people in this world have taught me also, people in trauma often, which is my work.
Can you describe for us what a typical day in your life would be like, what it would involve? I mean, it's not just obviously Ireland or Palestine. You travel to many other trouble spots around the world.
Do you want one of my secret days or my public?
Well, you answer whatever you see fit to.
No. But because I'm an independent psychologist, there's almost not quite a typical day, but often I'm traveling to places where there is conflict or trauma, and I'm training psychologists, social workers, people in mental health. And my philosophy of training is to go and touch the dirt myself and to be with people, do on-site training where I sit with people. I've actually, for example, in Palestine worked in the 2 uprisings with people doing a lot of support for professionals going to the field. I'm in Palestine currently, for example, I'm targeting teachers, psychologists and parents because they are the ones who will influence the coming generations' lives. So, and I believe everyone who lived under such situations could use healing, because there's many experiences people go through in a place like Palestine or in other places unspoken about. And for example, recently, 2 experiences out of Palestine have been one with in North Iraq, training psychologists, social workers who are working with victims of ISIS, and Yazidis, Kurds, and others. And also, my last job just before coming here was in Lebanon for a few days, training professionals, working with refugees, mostly Syrian refugees, and working with troubled Lebanese people. So I don't know if this is typical, but it could be on.
Of what you
yes,
do, though.
yes.
It certainly does that.
It's on the airplane. It's in the field. It could be in a garage with refugees. It could be in a nice place, sitting and doing training anywhere.
It's interesting you used the phrase "working with victims of ISIS"
Yes.
in northern Iraq, because for many people, unfortunately, in this part of the world, many have probably come to assume that ISIS almost represents all Muslims in the world, all people almost who follow Islam as a religion. And you plainly don't see it that way, plainly, and it's
No.
plainly not the case. But
No.
I mean, do you ever encounter problems because of that kind of misperception?
So far, I haven't. I mean, the victims I've worked with, I'd call them survivors because honestly, what they've endured, they're amazing survivors. They are Muslims themselves for the most part. The Kurds who have been killed and displaced are actually Muslims themselves. So extremism has no identity or religion. It can be anyone in any place. Unfortunately, just like we know in this place where religion is manipulated to divide people and scare people, people in the name of Islam, in the name of Judaism are doing it as we speak, or in the name of any religion. It's been done in history, unfortunately.
Have you yourself ever been guilty of making a wrongful perception of another person on the grounds of religion?
I think, I don't know if you saw my TED talk. But
Yes, I did, yes, yeah.
But before going to the US, I said it in my TED talk where, to me, I haven't dealt with Jews other than with soldiers. So to me, like it is the case to many Palestinians who don't know Jews other than the soldiers, it used to be that a Jewish person is an armed person. And so when I lived abroad, now I won't tell you how many years ago, so it's been a very enlightening and reassuring experience to meet Jews who are actually soulmates in my life till now. And people become victims in a package of prejudice depending on experiences we go through.
That description of Jewish people as soulmates, how would that be received by people back in Ramallah, where you come from?
It's fine. Once you explain it, it's fine. People who have never encountered, when you tell them that the religion is a coincidental birth, and it's like not every Muslim is ISIS, not every Jewish person is a Zionist soldier, they get it. People, no matter how simple they are and how distant they are from events, when you explain clearly and genuinely, they really they receive it well.
Mm-hmm. You talked about having worked with people whom you prefer to describe as survivors. Do you regard yourself as a survivor?
I think in some sense I do.
In what sense?
A lucky one. I think on a personal level, being blind in a society where there is not much means, and many blind people my age would, as we speak, perhaps be in some shelter or living a very limited life. I think just to make it in such a world is survival. And I think being Palestinian, where everything is possible, you can be. I mean, I've been caught sometimes going to work in the field in situations where anything could have happened. But I'm a lucky one. I mean, when I hear the stories of others who have been actually beaten up on checkpoints, recently I was doing healing with teachers, and I was telling them that we have many experiences that we just put under the carpet, and they affect our level of tolerance and how we deal with children. One shared an experience where he had to leave university because going to Bethlehem University, he was beaten up by soldiers, and he couldn't get back to that checkpoint again where he had to drop and go to the Open University, which is a bit less of a prestigious university. So, I mean, I am, but I consider myself a lucky one compared to other experiences.
But I think it was in your TED talk where you described yourself as triply disadvantaged, not merely being blind, not merely being Palestinian, but being a woman as well.
That too. I mean, you have to have inner power to make it in this world with these three trades, coincidental trades, right? And but I also learned, and life taught me that no matter what you're born with, if you have love in you and if you believe in yourself, you can communicate your ideas, your messages. And seriously, for the most part, I haven't had people blocked from bridging with me or with them. They can be from the most conservative, least educated, most educated, most posh, whatever. But it's been positive so far.
I can understand, you know, why, depending on situations or circumstances, any of those three things would be regarded as an obstacle. I mean, gender in this world, unfortunately, can still be problematical. Your nationality, Palestinian, for some people, will pose a difficulty, clearly. And the fact that you're blind, that would also be a difficulty. But in a strange way, can those also become, or be turned maybe, to your advantage in your field?
Yes. I think if you survive these three, then it can be an advantage, certainly. I remember when I first left the US to work with Intifada injured youth, people told me, but it's mostly men, do you think they will accept you as a woman? And actually they confided in me beautifully, and they were able to show vulnerability with me, and it hasn't been a problem. And blindness often has also been an advantage where people saw it as a vulnerability I overcame, and it made them feel secure, if you wish. Recently I was asked to speak to someone who was burnt and wouldn't see people, and they said, I think because of who you are and because you're blind, this person will accept to see you. He's isolated himself.
And did he?
Yes.
He accepted you, and you helped, therefore, I'm assuming, to begin at least a process of healing.
Yes, yes. Yeah. People are not worried about being judged on how they look like.
There's a phrase, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but been there, done that, bought a T-shirt. When I listen to your story, it means that you can back up, you know, what you sort of proclaim you do with actual achievement, and I think your achievements have been remarkable, to put it mildly. But coming from, I hope I don't offend you by saying it, from very humble beginnings back in Ramallah.
Right.
Could you describe just the circumstances you were born into there?
I was born into a refugee family where we actually my family lived in one room, and they had resettled when they were kicked out of their village. In 1948 areas. They have settled next to a Baptist church then, and we had one room, but we're lucky we had space to play around us that belonged to the church. And at a very early age I was sent to an English boarding school where I got my education till 7th grade, and then continued in mainstream schooling.
Was it a Christian school?
It was a very missionary school.
Yeah. And how did you wind up in a school like that?
Actually, a neighbor of my family's, who was a Quaker woman, she was responsible for the Quaker meeting house, also next to our humble house room, rather, and convinced my mom to send me to that school. She said, don't think now, don't think emotionally, think future. Laila must go to school. So this is how I wound up being there.
And what about other members of your family?
Other members, my parents, having had no television then, made 10 of us.
We had large families here too in the past, so we have to have a license, unfortunately. You know, so.
It's not just Catholics.
So a big family, though.
A big
and that must have, I mean, that must have, I would have thought, you know, in some senses have compounded, made things more difficult for you. It was a large family, born of refugees, living, I would imagine, probably fairly difficult circumstances.
Not easy circumstances, but it's kind of ironic because my mom specifically, but out of the 10, there's 3 who are blind. Me and a sister who's in the US and a professor who teaches at Bir Zeit University in Palestine. And my mom, I remember her praying to God that she thought we will never make it. And ironically, I think we survived in the best way, the blind ones in the family. We had the best education, and I think being different and having doors of a different school, for example, in my case, gave me opportunities to be independent, to think for myself more, and to not be limited by my parents' fears. And I think often refugees live with fears and cautiousness that they bring onto generations to come. But I think it freed me of drinking, if you wish, that fear. I still see it in my mom. A month ago, I told her, "Thank God you didn't raise me."
It might be a different outcome.
Yeah, yes.
But your mother, I mean, obviously, I know we were chatting about it last night. Your mother's still alive. She's 86 years of age.
Yes.
And a strong woman, I assume.
She's strong. She's strong. And with her courses, often, each time I'm going to travel, she says, "But why are you going to be safe? Why do you have to go to Iraq where there is ISIS? Why?" I said, "Mom, how many times in your life did you say why?" That's when I told her, "Mom, I'm so glad I didn't listen to you in life.
Yeah.
I would have gone nowhere."
But it's a fair point which she raises, because you do go to these difficult areas. Most people, if given the choice, wouldn't opt to go to northern Iraq and to come into such close proximity with ISIS fighters and so on. So there must have been times in your life where you have been in very, very serious danger.
Do you know, I honestly, generally, it's funny, and I don't brag, but generally, danger didn't worry me. As I told you last night, I think confinement worries me more. Like, I've been in missions with UNICEF in Darfur and South Sudan, and the word I hated the most was a curfew. And to me, I'm curious about people, and I would escape with the local people in Darfur, South Sudan, and go to local coffee shops and met with different kinds of people, not just the ones I'm supposed to work with. So generally, in my heart, I felt safe. I think I'm more driven by the cause I go for, and I feel in my heart secure.
It's interesting the places you've been to, and there's just one point on that I'd like to ask you, because you spent a lot of time in the United States, for example. You mentioned Darfur. You've travelled widely throughout the Middle East. You used the phrase earlier on as well about you like to touch the dirt.
The phrase what?
Touching the dirt.
Yes,
was it?
yes.
You like to meet local people. You go outside the nominated circle, if I put it like that. When you encounter all these different people, different nationalities in different places, are people different? Do you find that they're different, or do you find that they are actually essentially the same?
They're really the same. Like an old woman, there could be people close here. A young woman, 80 years old. 80 years old.
Nobody has walked out, you're okay.
Oh, okay. 8 years old, who actually traveled 11 days in the mountains. It reminded me of my mother.
That was in Iraq.
In
that
Iraq.
Was northern Iraq.
She's not much different than my mom, and she's witty like my mom, and beautiful. She cried, and then she said, "I survived Saddam's massacre, and this time I survived this massacre with ISIS, but this time I'm the only survivor," when she was crying. And when I told her, there must be a reason why God wanted you to live, what do you think gave you the strength to live? She suddenly changed and just laughed, and it's beautiful when people can cry and laugh, the same way. And she said life is precious. And it's beautiful. And the other women in the session said, actually, we're happy you're around.
Yeah.
So
why do you think someone like that survived a trek like that, 7 days through the mountains in the most inhospitable of circumstances?
I really think she said it. To her, life is precious, and she really wanted to live. And in the same session, a younger woman said, because I mostly at the end of sessions ask people, what strengths did you discover in yourself during this crisis? And a woman wickedly said, you know, women like this lady here, for example, wouldn't visit their sons who live 3 meters away. They said, oh, my legs, I can't. And the same woman managed to walk 11 days in the mountains.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there was a laugh around it. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, well, some people haven't made it here today because of the snow.
There you go.
You've made it from Jordan, despite
There
there
you
being
go,
snow at both ends of your journey.
Yeah, I think in every crisis, there's some people who have that strength of the soul to actually survive, and it's beautiful that these people exist.
The work that you do, it involves healing people. That's your objective, healing people.
Yes.
What kind of wounds or injuries, setbacks in people's lives are you seeking to address specifically? What kind of victims?
I especially target victims of trauma and people who are who would be marginalized, who would be invisible in the world. And I think trauma can make you a hard rock and can make a turning point in your life, given the right help to make a difference in life, or it can make you stronger. So it's these kind of people I tend to target.
And I mean, the fact that you, operate on an international level, it suggests to me that there isn't much help in these various places for people suffering those kinds of injuries or wounds.
There is, but I should say, unfortunately, it's not very community-based needs. Often international organizations give themselves the right to be egoistic experts and decide what's best. And I think we could be doing better in this world if we were a bit more sensitive to people. I think because of the global insecurity people have of employment, people tend to be a little bit self-indulged and career-oriented, which is understandable as long as it doesn't take over. But I have to give credit also to, there's many people who really go for the right reasons and have the passion. I've seen it in North Iraq amongst some who would really go out of their way to help.
Yeah, I would imagine that the kind of work you do, it wouldn't always necessarily be well received by people in certain organizations or institutions. People would regard it, we use the phrase here sometimes, as too touchy-feely. Do you get that criticism?
Mostly not. Although it reminds me of a men's group, Yazidi men I sat with. When at the end of the session, I decided to experiment with them, something I did with the women just before them, where everybody would give a massage, a shoulder massage, to the person next to them, have like a train arrangement. And the men in the beginning were, very uncomfortable. But they actually wind up, for the most part, doing it. Unfortunately, a boy rather, 15 years old, who survived death, who ISIS thought had died, and he luckily escaped. He clearly was like an ice board. He didn't want anyone to touch him. Otherwise, all the men eventually did it with laughter and, sometimes a bit of sarcasm in the beginning, but they'll manage.
Do you always succeed when you attempt to heal someone who has suffered a deep trauma, or has there ever been an occasion where you've had to maybe reluctantly decide that you can't help an individual?
I'm sure there is. For the most part, in my experience, it's been really positive, where it's been possible to reach people. Sometimes time doesn't allow. Like with the men, they were a bit too cautious of each other, for example, the Yazidi men. And recently, I was sharing with Maureen, I was with these teachers who, in the beginning, they were sarcastic of someone when the young teacher shared his experience of abuse on the checkpoint. But then I sat in front of him, I actually squatted in front of him, and said, have you been through similar experiences? And then his whole tone changed. So I think when you're genuinely with your heart and you know how to address people, for the most part, you will touch them.
I don't know how many people here in this audience will be familiar with it, but could you talk to us about your 3 candles?
Yes.
It's like a philosophy, I suppose, in your life for
candles. Yeah.
Yeah. Explain that for us.
Because when you do the work I do, sometimes it's overwhelming. I see people in the field who I support feel helpless, and it's useless. Whatever we do is useless. It keeps getting worse. And I always tell people a candle might be small, but if each one of us lights a candle in our corner, in our capacity, the world will be full of light. So let's keep trying. And it's really I learned to have this philosophy in life to not get frustrated with what I see. I mean, I start working with Palestinians, and then Syria comes up, and then ISIS comes up, and it's just an endless chain. And you know, to have this candle image keeps me going, I think.
What candles have you yourself lit then in your life?
I hope quite a few in many people's lives.
You developed friendships, for example, that was it Wendy, one of your?
Yeah.
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 More than a friend, it's you know, a special person, I think, in your life.
She's a soulmate friend.
Yeah.
I mentioned in my TED talk, she's one of the was one of the few first Jewish people I've met who weren't armed. And when I told her I had an interview with, I went and did an interview with Quakers to work with prisoners. I said, the woman who interviewed me was really nice, even though she's Jewish. It's the first time I meet a nice Jewish person. She said, no, it's not. I said, don't tell me you're Jewish now. And she said, yes, I am. And that was my turning point, you know. Life just through lovely people teaches you lessons of not generalizing. And the more I'm getting blinder and blinder to people. I don't see difference in people, really.
Which is a good thing in that sense, in that context.
Yeah.
You used the word that your work is overwhelming at times.
It is.
Do you have difficulty yourself dealing with it? Because you come across as an incredibly positive and upbeat person, and I know from last night you're a very good-humoured person as well. You're great fun.
I often would go home from work. I remember in Lebanon the drivers would be shocked when I turned from a smiling, empowering person to crying on the way home. Laila, what's wrong? I said, no, I just have to get it out. It's sad, you know. So I have my sad moments. I have my times where I just want to be quiet for a day or two. And I'm also playful, and this helps me. I swim. I play music. I walk. I ride horses. I haven't done in 2 years. But, you know, I'm always exploring playful things, and I'm very aware of my energy when it's a bit too much and when I'm a bit losing tolerance. I just take off. And this is the advantage of being an independent worker, because I can take off and can just say, no, sorry, I can't do the job, and I'm not a slave for any organization, and I don't have to pretend I'm doing work when I'm not really convinced.
I'm going to invite people here in the audience to, if they have any questions for you in a moment, to do that. But to me, it's a kind of it's an unusual experience, because you strike me as almost like a force of nature. You are unbelievably positive. And I remember on one occasion being described by a former boss of mine as, and I quote, the most negative person I've ever met.
Can't imagine that.
And she said, and I have just been through a bad divorce. So,
are you still divorced?
The boss. The boss had. But how do you stay upbeat in these very difficult places?
It's really what I described. I think I'm not embarrassed to cry, and I'm not embarrassed to sit on a children's swing, and I'm not embarrassed to be a fool. And I think this is it. When you're natural and you don't have much shame in life, if you wish, as long as it doesn't hurt other people, it's fine. I have love in my heart, and I think love is really keeps you energized.
Right. Anybody here in the audience here have any questions for Laila? Susan,
Laila, Susan here. You shared a story the last time you were here, and I'd love you to share it again.
Oh, please don't.
No, it was just a beautiful. It was a beautiful story about when you were in New York and you met the homeless man.
Yeah.
And I'd love you to share that again, because it was such a beautiful. It was a beautiful story.
I shared the story because, as I said earlier, I do go for the invisible. I have a special, I am a snoop. I was escaping Palestine's problems, and I went to New York supposedly to visit family and friends for 2-3 weeks. I got stuck 3 months there. But shortly after being in New York, I was looking for a public phone, and the person who came and asked what help I need, I probably looked blind and lost then. I had a feeling is homeless, the way he had bags with him and so on. And sneakily I asked this guy, where do you live? And he said, on the street. Why? So he said he has a disease, HIV. And I said, first time knowingly I'm with an HIV person. I said, you know, I missed my train. Why don't we go have a bite in a place in the train station, in Penn Station in New York? And he said, with me? I said, yeah, with you. So I wanted to hear his story. What brings a person to this point in life? And his story basically was this man was a black man, came from a violent family, marginalized, started taking drugs, and drugs brought him to HIV. HIV brought him to homelessness. And he was telling me his story, and I was like holding my tears. Oh God, please let me stay strong while this man talks. And we kept quiet for a few minutes, and he wrote me a poem which meaningly said that millions of people passed me and only a blind person was able to see me, or something like this. So it was very touching, and then my tears really just, you know, slipped, and it was very touching. So I went to the bar at the train station, and I was crying, sobbing, and the man knew me because I often would go have a drink, actually a Bailey's at that place. And he said, Laila, what's wrong? And I said, this is the story. He said, come on, don't be silly. There's millions like him. I said, exactly. That's exactly the problem, that there's millions like him and they're viewed as a number. And it hurts me. And so it was a touching story. When I told my sister, she said, you're so stupid. You run away from problems back home and you come and look for new ones in New York.
Yes, it's not many people would do what you did, I think, on that occasion, to put it mildly. Can I take you back from New York back to Ramallah?
Yeah, take me back.
Tell me something about Ramallah. What kind of a place is it? What are the people there like?
Ramallah is a beautiful city. I love it. I wish we had the sea. It'll be perfect. But Ramallah is a city of culture, concerts, theater. It's a diverse city. Originally, it's a small Christian town, and it's growing to be a city where everybody in the West Bank comes to. We have the international organizations, the ministries, coffee shops, evening night. One of my favorite places in Ramallah is called Snowbar. Snowbar means pine trees. And Snowbar is I find there's Palestine and there's Snowbar. It's almost a country of its own somehow. It's so beautiful. It's in an outdoor place with pine trees, with a swimming pool, with a playful, casual atmosphere in that place. So Ramallah is, people who come to Ramallah say it's addicting. They always come back, actually.
But it's a place that has experienced many problems, clearly, as well. Do you find that, I mean, I just wonder if the Ramallah that you described there is not the one that I would have seen in my mind's eye, I have to say. Do most people sort of get Ramallah wrong?
The media shows you what they want to show you. Yeah. So even when we had home incursions, I was there part of the time. The media didn't speak about fathers who for the first time went and played with children in the street football until soldiers caught them in the street. Or like me and my neighbors, we would put music and dance often under the curfew, and many people did. Like the theater, a theater in Ramallah, a bunch of young people decided to do comedy shows under actually the, what do you call it? When we had, oh my God, rockets in Ramallah, the theater would sneak and open, and young people would do comedies making fun of the situation, criticizing everything. How people deal with martyrs, how noisy, and how the martyr maybe was disturbed because of all that. Oh my God, this kind, you know, and how people react to rockets. So I mean, Ramallah is everything. But again, I think pain is inevitable under occupation, but it's how you deal with it. To me, I've seen many positive images in Ramallah during even the hardest times.
I mean, I'm just the phrase is in my head at the moment is the plight of the Palestinians. I would have thought that there are a few Palestinians who can divorce themselves from the politics of the situation there. Can you, or are you, as a person, intensely political yourself?
No, I actually try to not get into the politics and focus on and keep my energy on what can I do to empower people. And so far, I canceled the television from my house many years ago because of that. And people say, Laila, don't be ignorant. You have to listen to news a bit more. I said, why? To depress me and then not be able to help people? I don't need the television.
Do you find it kind of dispiriting in that sense?
To
listen to news when you listen to it?
It's very depressing.
Depressing, yeah.
It's really depressing. I have to share with you a funny situation.
Yeah.
Recently, I went to work in Jericho, and I rarely do it, but I took the public transport, which is like a van. And a man said, the driver put the news on, and this guy very angrily said, I'm so sick of news, kill, injured, what's this? I said, you know, you're right. That's why I don't like to listen to the news. And the man heard me speak on the phone and figured I'm blind. He said, I understand you're blind. I'm blind myself, the man said. So I said, how about if I make you happy? I took my flute out, which is always in my purse, and played flute, and everybody in the van was a bit happier then. And the driver was wise to change the news and put music.
Can you imagine, can you foresee a day when the problems in the Middle East will be settled?
I think, like everything else has been eventually, I know it will. I don't know when. And I hope the damage I think healing will minimize the further damage of future generations. But if it's better in Ireland, and if the Holocaust was over, and if, you know, Armenians survived, then I know one day it'll change for us.
So that keeps you going, I suppose, that
Yes.
sort of aspiration, maybe?
Yes, somebody told me a saying I like. They said, power is like a ball. One day it's in your hand, and the other day in my hand. It doesn't stay in one hand. So as long as whoever takes the ball next time doesn't repeat the pattern, which, who knows, seems like we humans don't learn from history.
You are an incredibly resilient person, clearly. And isn't that would also describe most Palestinians?
Many are. People are a bit losing it now. I mean, going to extreme religiousness and conservativeness is a sign of defeat often. And I worry when it happens to Palestinians or other people in parts of the world. It's a bit a hopelessness when people do. But you'll find a lot of resilience, and you'll find the other.
Can I ask you how you found America when you went there to study?
For me, it was an opportunity, and I'm actually recently into 11. I dropped my work for a year and went to Harvard, studied at the School of Government, just to see what it's like on that end of the stick.
In this part of the world, we call that name dropping, by the way. to go and study at Harvard, it will be many people's ultimate ambition.
Forget them. Yeah. But I decided to just go to School of Government there to check what it's like to understand that part of the piece, because I always work with survivors of these potential people who aim to be in government. Mm-hmm. And it's actually, on one hand, it's been a beautiful opportunity, I have to say, because, for example, previously I haven't studied much math or statistics almost at all. And I told people at the university, listen, I'll wash dishes, but I don't want to take math or statistics. Mm-hmm. And they actually, of course, it's also about resources, but also priorities. So in that way, I appreciate they did allocate people to help me where I actually passed subjects I thought I'll never pass. But on the other hand, I find it's a bit of a material world, something in the sense of community and spirit is missing for me, which is why I tend to run away. Everybody doesn't understand why I want to run from a land of opportunity. And for me, it's certainly been a land of opportunity because it's where I got my education, actually.
And what did the Americans make of you?
Crazy. I think, like, I mean, I have friends, and it's like every place in the world. People are touched by kindness and by humor, and you connect with human beings eventually. So different people made different things. In the School of Government, you know, I was a different kind of character for people who were very cautious, trying to make it to be a minister. I had no interest of such kind.
Yeah,
I was very outspoken.
That's surprising. Anybody else? Yeah, question from the audience here for you now, Laila.
Laila, Seamus here. Darfur and northern Iraq and Lebanon and many, many other places, they have been privileged. Why are you privileging this place among all those places?
Here?
What brings you here?
You know what? There is a spirit here in Ireland that I love, and the people are beautiful. They're open-minded on one hand. They're open-minded, but they have the warmth Middle Eastern have. You know, and I don't know. There's something beautiful here. I find people who survive traumas like Irish people did develop a spirit and a sense of community that I really appreciate.
What was your perception of Ireland before you came here?
Palestinians tend to naively idealize Irish people. As if an English friend of mine said, Palestinians are stupid. They tend to idealize every Irish, not knowing that some of them have the Israeli flag on their houses. I said, it's okay. Love is always better than hate. It's fine.
Any other people with questions for Laila?
Eamon? Ordinary Palestinians and how they handle the trauma. Here in Ireland, many people take to drink and drugs to handle disappointment in their lives. Is this a problem, or these problems that are daily apparent in Palestine?
They're increasing. The areas nearing the wall and settlements are having increasing problems of such. I tend to talk to pharmacists, and people use a lot of antidepressants. There's unfortunately domestic violence naturally is increasing, and violence in schools is increasing. Wherever there is unresolved trauma, people, deal differently. You'll find initiators who want to make a difference and embrace the community, and some people who just let anger out on others. And I mean, of course, a teacher who's been beaten up on a checkpoint and never dared to speak about it has to ventilate somewhere. So different people deal with it differently. I can see we have increasing problems traveling all through the country, actually.
It's kind of frightening that those are the kinds of problems that we would have experienced here as well. We're in some ways in very, very different worlds, but the manifestations of the problems are very, very similar.
Yes, yeah.
You find it everywhere, probably?
Yeah, everywhere.
Yeah. Any other questions for Laila here? Yeah, Maureen? Yeah.
Laila, Maureen here. I suppose you talked a little before about being a woman. Would you elaborate, the differences and the difficulties of being a woman? When you talked about before about Hamas being the oppressor, but also then the Israelis being the oppressors, and the sorts of ways in which Hamas would try to control you as a woman?
I think every religious group who use religion as a tool to interfere and confiscate people's personal freedoms is oppressive, whether it's Zionist or whether it's fundamental Islam or whether it's fundamental Christians. And for example, in Gaza, I shared with you before, I chose to go swim with a bathing suit in 212 when no woman would do it. And I was faced with 8 officers from Hamas questioning why did I do that, and wanted me to sign a promise to not do it again. And I said, I'm not going to sign, because if I come back, I'm going to do it again. But religion has been the most used tool to, I always say it, to intimidate people. And fear is the gas that religion uses to disempower people. Yeah.
You must have remarkable courage, because would I tell you, if I was confronted by 8 guys from Hamas who asked me to put on a ladies' bathing suit, I would do it, do you see yourself or regard yourself as a brave person?
In general, I am. I hate to admit in public that my heart was a little bit beating.
It wouldn't just be my heart, I can tell you. Yeah.
But
You have to finish the story, and that you told your friends the next time you'd go without a bathing suit.
Yeah, I said, if they don't like the bathing suit, no problem. Maureen, why do you have to embarrass me in public? I'm going to Gaza in 10 days or less now. Don't get me in trouble, all right?
Can I just ask again, did you say, my name's James, that fear is the gas that religious people use to intimidate people? Is that what you said?
Yes, and politicians are the same, right? But fear is the most used gas, I think. Look what's happening in Paris. If people don't do some education, so much violence out of fear is going to become, and so many tyrants will be more powerful in this world because of what happened in Paris recently. But it takes really wise leadership to say the things that people don't dare to say in crisis, I think. I wouldn't want to be in Paris just now.
Yeah. I was going to ask you when you mentioned that the Charlie Hebdo affair. What difference will that make in the lives of? Well, how do you think it'll affect Muslims, ordinary Muslims living in France, in Paris, in the banlieue?
It depends how it's cultivated, I think. Again, because uninformed people tend to generalize and. Like we saw after September 11, many people who just looked a little bit Arab, who had nothing to do with it, were beaten up or something. So I think it can. People tend to follow blindly prejudice and racism out of fear. So I hope some awareness will prevent further violence, because it becomes a mad ball again, and it's like a fire.
It's understandable, though, in one sense, isn't it? On a human level,
sure.
People do become fearful in
sure.
situations like that.
Sure.
So, what advice would you give to, for example, the authorities in France, who are probably wrestling with a number of problems as a result of what happened in Paris?
To not plant fear in people's hearts, and to create more love and moving forward, because the world is becoming a small village, and if hatred becomes between groups of people, I mean, even in France, they have Muslim and Arab citizens. They don't want to push people to extremism. I believe marginalization is often the reason for extremism also, and I hope they don't do the mistake of creating enemies in their own land, because it can become very uncontrollable.
What would your advice be to those Muslims who live in France in places like, well, Paris and Marseille and elsewhere, and who are probably very, very fearful at the moment, and understandably so? It's
to explain themselves and have love in their hearts, to not react in a reactive way, to be responsive, to actually educate people. I mean, being blind, I spend all my life, and I'm not saying with an ego, educating people who, you know, you'd always hear comments saying, oh, why do you have to be alone? And I can react with anger and then I flip you, or I can say, you know, how would you like if somebody always held your hand, and say, I wouldn't want to be always confined with someone. And the same, I think we have, when it's our turn in history to be labeled, it's our responsibility to be educators and not reactors.
It's, you know, in some ways, you know, the response to what happened in Paris can be encouraging when you see millions of people taking to the streets in defense of freedom of speech and all of
yes.
that. And I mean, that's a very, very encouraging sign.
Sure.
But in the background too, we have, you know, the rise of the far right in
yes.
France. I mean, they've become mainstream now, in fact, in France, and the far right on the march again in Germany. Does that kind of thing frighten you?
Right wing always frightens me, and I know where it comes from on a personal level in people's hearts. People who have unresolved anger or have feelings of marginalization tend to cultivate these events. You know, I would like to share how everything is really connected and interconnected in life. Once when I was dealing with an Iraqi person whose relative was a prominent person and killed in Iraq, and their villa and their 2 businesses was bombed. I asked him, does he know who did it? He said yes. He said it was our neighbors from another religious sect, and that's not the issue. He said historically, their father would tell them, look how failures you are. Why don't we become like these, like the sons of blah blah, meaning the person I was sitting with. And this personal comparison with neighbors must have, you know, loaded anger in these neighbors, where as soon as it was anarchy, they used this anger and being from a different religious sect to rid them of everything they have, their father, their possessions. So I think, again, I think personal and political trauma is all connected, and we have to be aware who's doing the call and who we're following, really.
Any other questions here from the audience? Everybody perfectly satisfied here? Forever hold your peace then. There's correct me if I'm wrong, I think it might have been Sir Isaac Newton, I don't know, but who used the phrase written on his epitaph, or whatever, if I can see farther than you, it's because I've been standing on the shoulder of giants. I think it was Newton. In your case, Laila, education, you've mentioned the word education or educating a number of times in this conversation. You've benefited from being educated, clearly, and you're now, you know, you're putting back into the community that which you drew from it, in a sense. How important is education in people's lives? What role does it, you know, perform or fulfill for them?
It's really important, but not just on an intellectual level. I always, when I train people, remind them you have your body, your heart, your mind, and your soul. And when you do education, take care of all the 4 elements to be a holistic person. And I find education to certainly be very important.
It's, I'm assuming, very empowering. I mean, the fact that you have achieved what you have in education is remarkable, given what I mentioned earlier on, are very, very sort of humble origins, but you've been to places, you yourself mentioned Harvard, you know, it has taken you to the most incredible places and it allowed you to do the most wonderful things.
It has. But again, I think people in the streets of Darfur and Iraq and Palestine educated me, I'd say, even more than Harvard did. So it's life experiences. It's giving yourself to the moment and giving yourself the humility to listen and learn from the smallest person in front of you is also educating.
How long can you keep doing what you do? I imagine it requires great energy.
It does.
You clearly bring great passion to it, but you can't, you know, remain that upbeat forever.
Let's see. I think as long as I can love and I can swim and play, I'm fine.
With or without the costume?
Yeah, either one.
Okay. Any other questions for Laila then? Everyone okay? Look, Laila, it's been a privilege to have met you, a pleasure to talk to you. And I mean, the person who I think you mentioned earlier on, who says, I mean, the fact that you're blind, you see better than most of us do. I think that's the reality, you know.
Thank you, thanks.
And it's an enormous privilege to have met you. And maybe you want to show your appreciation. I'll just take that hug we talked about earlier on. I'll take that hug. Great to meet you. I'm waiting for my hug here, Laila.
Oh, your hug? Wait,
wait, yes,
wait. Where's my hug? He won't allow me before.
We wouldn't do it before because we didn't want to give her any clues to what I look like.
Right.
Like,
You haven't told her what you look like, Paul.
Okay, Susan, you tell her what I look like.
That's not fair.
I work with Emer for 30 years. Emer, you can tell Laila what I look like.
Laila, would you believe I said he's very tall?
Come on, that's the easiest for me to figure out.
I'm not actually.
Laila, touch his head. Lay your hands on his head.
What's my head? Yeah, you can do it now, yeah.
Go forward. No, go forward.
Go forward.
Go forward. Touch the front of his head.
Top of the
It's
head.
going to be harassment now.
I'm banking on it.
Go on, use 2 hands,
The
Laila,
bathing
feel his
suit
head.
was bad enough.
Give me a pan on it. Feel that stomach. belly dancing last night. I'm going for belly dancing